pano premamritam banidhi dhira dhira jana priyau priyakarau nirmasaram pujitau Sri Chaitanya Kripa Bharau Bhuvi Bhuva Bharavahantarakam Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghujagam Sri Jiva Goswami Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tana Param Premamritam Banidhi Dhira Dhira Jana Priyam Priyakaram Nirmasaram Pujitam Nana Shastra Vicharanam Sadharma Sanghastapakam Lokanam Hitakaranam Tribhuvane Mannam Saranyakaram Nana Shastra Vicharanam Sadharma Sanghastapakam Lokanam Hitakaranam Tribhumane Mannam Sannakaram Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajananandi Namatvalikam Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghujagam Sri Jiva Goswami Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tana Param Premamritam Banidhi Sri Chaitanya Kripa Bharau Bhuvi Bhuva Bharavahan
Kumagyanatmirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ajunulambito Bujo Kanakabhatatu Sankirtanaya Pitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataro Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Gurudaya Pushpavanto Chitra Sangdo Tamuno Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Abhayo Charano Sako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subalapriyo Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye.
Hare Krishna. Shri Gaudiya Vaishnav Guru Parampara Ki Jai, Shri Jiva Goswami Ki Jai, Sat Sandarbhas Ki Jai, Anantakota Vaishnavind Ki Jai. Glorious devotees, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak on Shri Jiva Goswami's Krsna Sandarbha. We're going to begin this series by first doing a little review of the Sandarbhas in general. And then we're going to today go into the Tattva Sandarbha, the Mangalacharana specifically, because this Mangalacharana for this Tattva Sandarbha is actually applicable to the entirety of Sri Jiva Goswami's presentation. So as you know, Srila Jiva Goswami was the youngest of the Goswamis. He was a nephew of Sanatan and Rupa Goswami, the son of Vallabha Anupam, who passed early. And he was inspired by his uncles, so much so that at a very young age, he wanted to renounce everything. And he actually did so. Doing so, he went to Navadvip, and there he had the association of Lord Nityananda, who encouraged him to go on to Benares and receive some preliminary education in all the different schools of thought, the Saddarshan. And that he did, and he learned from Madhusudana Vachaspati. And there he got an overview of the Astika, the theistic Indian philosophy, and also the Nastika, the atheistic schools. So there are 6 Astika schools, and of those, Vedanta is the most prominent for the Vaishnav community. After that, he went on to Vrindavan, and he directly took association with Sanatan and Rupa Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and they completely schooled him in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Although for social reasons, neither Sanatan nor Rupa accepted direct disciples because they considered themselves fallen in the terms of society, because they had been contaminated by bad association, having served a Muslim ruler before they took shelter of Vrindavan. So that they never felt themselves, they never felt that they should go against the social norms of the day. But we note that Rupa Goswami did accept Jiva Goswami as his direct disciple. And as far as we know, this is the only disciple that either Sanatan or Rupa accepted. Now, a couple things that we have from Jiva Goswami, which are quite amazing, is the whole terminology where our sampradaya takes shelter of their understanding of divinity. This phrase we hear, achinta beta beta tattva, simultaneously one and different, inconceivably one and different. This term itself was coined by Sri Jiva Goswami. And not only that, but Jiva Goswami was so prolific in his writing that He was second only to Srila Vyasadeva himself. It's said that he composed some 400,000 Sanskrit verses. This would be the equivalent of 4 Mahabharats. So quite astounding, his literary contribution. But what we'll find as we dive deeper into the Sandarbhas, and specifically, is how he basically gave a real standing to Gaudiya Vaishnavism and the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through his writing and through the Sandarbhas. So let's go on to an overview of the Sandarbhas themselves. As I said, the Sandarbhas are a presentation of the viewpoint of knowledge, epistemology, of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And it's quite radical. What Sri Chaitanya came and gave was for the day extremely in opposition to the norms of Vaishnavism that had been in place for centuries. Those norms centered around a substantiation of a Sampradaic viewpoint regarding divinity that centered on the Prasthana Trayi. So prior to the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what we find is that a school of thought of Vaishnavism would be supported, would be held up by the main acharyas promoting different schools of Vaishnava thought through the what's called the 3 highways, the 3 great gateways to knowledge. One being Bhagavad Gita, the 10 Upanishads, the primary 10 Upanishads, and the Vedanta Sutra. So the acharyas of different Vaishnava lineages would provide a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, on the Bhagavad Gita, and their commentary on the main Upanishads would constitute the viewpoint of the Sampradaic idea. So, of course, this was there for Ramanuja and Madhva. But along comes Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his focus is not on the Vedanta Sutra. His focus is not on Bhagavad Gita. The focus of his attention is to the Srimad Bhagavatam, and specifically at his time, the commentary of Sridhar Swami, who was also from the Sri Sankaracharya line. So this was a revolution, a spiritual revolution for the day, so to speak. This new viewpoint that really, if we want to enter into the heart of theistic Vedanta, that we should do through the Srimad Bhagavatam as opposed to the Prasthana Trayi. Now, what we find that Jiva Goswami does is he fortifies this position by, as we'll find as we go on in the Tattva Sandarbha, where we come to the section where he discusses his methodology. And his methodology is unique in this regard. His methodology is he uses the commentaries of Ramanuja and Madhva and Sridhar Swami to basically prove this conclusion that of all entranceways into theistic thought, of all entryways, Srimad Bhagavatam is the topmost. Now, I don't know if we actually can really understand fully what this meant. But imagine your Abrahamic tradition. Imagine like walking into the Catholic tradition, and you take the Catholic tradition, of course, is centered on their understanding of the Bible, and automatically saying, now set the Bible aside, and really you just need to take this one aspect of spiritual thought that's in Christianity, and this should become central. We're going to set aside the Bible as central and take whatever a specific, I'm not familiar enough, unfortunately, to give some full comparison there, but to set aside the Prasthana Trayi, this is extraordinary for the time. And of course, all of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan movement was in itself extraordinary. To the whole kirtan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so extraordinary. But I hope through these presentations I can bring you into the heart of what distinguishes us, specifically in regards to the other theistic sampradayas, what distinguishes the Gaudiya Sampradaya, and why this distinction is so significant in spiritual revelation. So let me move forward a little bit, and so we don't get just hung up in this discussion. So an overview of the Sandarbhas. The Sandarbhas are referred to both as the Sat Sandarbhas, meaning the 6 Sandarbhas. They're also referred to as the Bhagavat Sandarbha because the entirety of the Sandarbhas utilize the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavat. So they're known as the Bhagavat Sandarbha because they fully bring out the meaning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and they fully give the perspective of the Gaudiyas in regards to spirituality by utilizing what is there in the Bhagavatam. So the Sandarbhas are basically divided into 3 sections. First, the first section dealing with Sambandha Gyan, the second dealing with Abhideya, and the third Prayojan. This is done in 6 books. The first 4 books dealing with Sambandha Gyan, being the Tattva Sandarbha, the Bhagavat Sandarbha, the Paramatma Sandarbha, and the Krishna Sandarbha, which we're going to work our way up to in these first classes. And then we have the practice, the Abhideya, which is dealt with in the Bhakti Sandarbha. and then the Prayojan in the Priti Sandarbha. So we will begin here, first of all, with an overall understanding, which we all know from the Bhagavatam, of the significance, according to our Gaudiya perspective, of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is the literary manifestation of Krishna himself after he departed 5,000 years ago. Krishna swa dharmapo bhagate, dharma jana dibi saha, kalau nasta drisam esa, puranarko dunodita. This Bhagavat Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. What's going to be here? Excuse me while I get used to this method of giving classes online. So the Sandarbhas are the most thorough and systematic presentation of the philosophy and theology of Srimad Bhagavatam. And I like to look at it somewhat like this. As Guru Maharaj has often said, he says, the Bhagavat Purana, the Srimad Bhagavatam, is this around which all Gaudiya Vaishnavism revolves. And what Jiva Goswami's done is he has truly brought out the full understanding of that sun. And we notice that, and we'll see through this presentation of the Sandarbhas that he substantiates the Siddhanta and the conclusions that he's going to give us regarding spirituality by utilization of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll get to a deeper understanding of that when we get to his methodology. But we notice in doing that although Sankaracharya's radical interpretation of Advaita Vedanta was the most prominent at the time, Jiva Goswami does not directly confront that because he utilizes the knowledge and the commentary of Ramanuja and Madhvacharya in his own Sat Sandarbhas, and they've already dealt with the radical non-dualism of Advaitavad. In their own commentaries. So let's look a little more deeply at the Tattva Sandarbha itself. It establishes the authority of the Bhagavat as the epistemological theory of knowledge, means praman. What this means is the knowledge, what we look to acquire knowledge is a field of science called epistemology. And of course, different schools of thought go to different sources for their knowledge and as the authorities for that knowledge. So Gaudiya Vaishnava is unique. We want to go to the source of knowledge for everything. We want a comprehensive solution, not just a solution that would deal with one specific area. So this is extraordinary to really get to the heart of what is the nature of being. We have to, first of all, be able to see that that nature of being is beyond the phenomenality that we experience in our day-to-day lives. But how can we establish that? And how can we establish that in truth in a way that will stand up to the modern schools of thought? And what I think you'll find is extraordinary in the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami is how he is able to put forward this knowledge as presented in Srimad Bhagavatam in such a way that it can capture the mind of all that are looking for truth. And who isn't looking for truth, no matter where we go? We want a truthful, truth will give us complete fulfillment in no matter what our endeavor may be. I know it's sometimes difficult for us to accept that in these very current times. Within the last decade or so, truth seems to be pushed to the wayside in so many ways. But in essence, I think that we could say all of humanity are truth seekers. If they're honest, and thorough honesty is one of the first requirements for somebody that's seeking the truth. And of course, as we know, the second verse of the Bhagavad Purana itself speaks to the significance of taking up a quest for truth, which is thoroughly honest, without some cheating mentality. So I want to go on here to our Sandarbhas. There's an overview here of the Sandarbhas, but I'm going to go ahead and we'll go back to that. But in today's class, I wanted to begin at least with the Mangalacharana. So at the beginning of any truly significant contribution or endeavor, one generally will invoke auspiciousness. So similarly, we find in the writings of the Vaishnavas that at the beginning of their presentations, they generally give us a Mangalacharana. And the Mangalacharana consists of generally three overarching ideas. The first one being an offering of respects, of obeisance to the predominating deity, their worshipable deity, to the Lord, to their spiritual masters, to the literature themselves that they look to either write or to comment upon. So this is the the Namas Kriyatmaka of a Mangalacharna. There's also the Asarvad, and the Asarvad slokas in a Mangalacharna presentation are centered around the giving of blessings to those that are undertaking the endeavor of associating with the literature itself. And the third is the Vastu Nirdesh, which is what's the book about, identifying the primary subject. So I want to share with you the Mangalacharna verses. For the Sat Sandarbhas, which are presented in full in the Tattva Sandarbha, begin as follows. I hope everyone can see the full verse there. And it's here again, we come to an amazing display at the very beginning of his presentation by Srila Jiva Goswami. At the very onset, he quotes this verse from Bhagavatam Purana, Krishna Varnam Twisa Krishnam, Sangopangastra Parsadam, Yajnai Sankirtana Prayar, Yajantihi Sumeda Sa. And then he's going to go on and he's going to specifically point out who is this personality that the Bhagavatam is speaking of as that incarnation, that manifestation of the Godhead who appears in Kali Yuga. So a translation of the verse in English: in the age of Kali, the Supreme Absolute, Bhagavan, appears within this world with a non-blackish complexion and constantly sings or describes the names of Krishna, accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. Those endowed with discriminating wisdom worship the Absolute in this form primarily through sacrifice of the self in complete kirtan, singing the names of God, involving the totality of one's being. For Jiva Goswami to put this verse at the beginning of such a significant presentation is truly extraordinary when we consider what he's out to accomplish. He's basically saying this is the purpose. This is a Vastar Nudesh. This is the primary subject of the whole work here. And he's going to go on in his next verse to say who this verse is speaking of. And this is a verse of his own composition. The second verse of his Tattva Sandarbha, the second of his Mangalacharna verses. And this is an offering of obeisances to his God, to his understanding of the complete manifestation of Bhagavan. In Kali Yuga, we take shelter of Sri Krishna Chaitanya through full participation of the self in complete kirtan, samkirtan, and other forms of devotion. He is golden without, while concealing his blackish complexion within. And he has revealed the transcendental majesty of his bodily limbs and of his integral associates. Jiva goes on in his Mangalacharna to offer obeisances to his primary gurus, all glories to Sri Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, who reside in the land of Mathura. They have engaged me in writing this book to broadcast the essential truth, tattva, regarding Bhagavan. Then he goes on to praise Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, a friend of Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatan, born in a South Indian Brahmin family, compiled the original version of this book after extracting the essence from the works of ancient Vaishnav masters. So he basically says, what I've done, and he goes on to say in detail what he's done. Some parts of his book, referring to Gopal Bhatta's presentation, were in order, some were not in order, and other parts were incomplete or missing. After thorough deliberation, Sri Jiva now rewrites this book in an appropriate order. So he's giving great credit to the notes and the preliminary work of Gopal Bhatta Goswami as fundamental to his presentation of the Sandarbhas. Now, the work of Gopal Bhatta Goswami is extinct. We don't have that for any reference at this time, but we can rest assured that everything of essence there is in Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas. Then we come to a very important aspect of his Mangalacharna, the eligibility of the reader. And this can be a little bewildering, so we're going to discuss it at a little length. Jiva Goswami says, this book may be studied only by one whose sole aspiration is to worship the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. All others are forewarned as to the implications of this investigation. He's basically saying, if this book is for people who want to enter into a thorough turning of consciousness to Lord Krishna. So you may question, well, wouldn't the purpose of the outreach of the book be to bring people to Krishna? And really what we will find is, in addition to the Sandarbhas themselves, Jiva Goswami wrote his own commentary to the first 4 Sandarbhas to further unpack them. And as I said, the first 4 Sandarbhas deal with Sambandha Gyan. So in his own commentary, if I can find it here, Sarva Samvadini, his self-commentary, he unpacks this further. And in that unpacking, we can look to some ideas as to the nature of this 6th verse, 6th Anucheda. All the presentations of ideas in the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami are referred to as Anuchedas. Anucheda would translate to mean a section. So in all these various sections, he doesn't call them slokas because they're not really slokas. They're ideas of thought he puts forth, which we'll go to the methodology, as I said, in a while. But he presents a theistic idea, He supports that idea by a verse from the Bhagavat Purana or other primary scripture, but primarily the Bhagavat Purana. And then he supports it fully by the commentaries of the great scholars of the day, Ramanuj, Madhvacharya, Sridhar Swami, the great commentator of yore on the Bhagavat Purana. Now, we as Gaudiya Vaishnavas would naturally question, well, why doesn't he use the ideas put forth by the Gaudiya Sampradaya itself? Why not put forth the ideas regarding these verses of the Bhagavat Purana as given by Sanatana Goswami in his own Brihat Bhagavatamrita, or Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in all these other writings of the contemporary Gaudiyas of the day? Why aren't those used as his support in the Sandarbhas? But what the Sandarbhas are doing is they are establishing Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And in order to do that, he is relying on and presenting Gaudiya Vaishnavism using the theistic ideas and concepts and conclusions of the great scholars and acharyas who are recognized by all Vaishnavas. This is going to give real substance to his presentation. Gaudiya Vaishnavism is, as I said, extremely unique. It basically is going into the world of theistic thought of the day. It's turning it on its head. And the whole idea of the goal, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inquired from Ramananda, what is the goal of life and how to attain it? Up to the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this goal had remained hidden, just as Sri Chaitanya himself is hidden as an avatar of the day. So this goal of prema, of love, wasn't put forth as the topmost. So much so that even Srila Vyasadeva himself, after compiling, after the advent of Sri Krishna, and after putting everything in writing for the unfortunate condition of those in Kali Yuga, not having superior brain substance, short-lived, inferior brains, we generally are not so fortunate as to hear something once and remember it for the rest of our lives, as others in other ages had that capacity of fine intelligence to do. So Srila Vyasadeva himself was not fully satisfied. And as we know, that dissatisfaction resulted in the manifestation in full of the Bhagavat Purana again under his pen. He wrote it again to bring out the essence of what is spirituality. But here we see 4,500 years later, no major acharyas have picked up on the point until the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They haven't really got it. what was Srila Vyasudev's contribution in presenting the Bhagavat Purana. It hadn't fully taken until Krishna himself comes as Sri Chaitanya to broadcast it broadly to the world. Really, the goal is not artha, karma, dhamma, moksha. This is not the goal. This moksha of freedom from entanglement in material life is not the topmost aspiration of your spirituality. It's nice to be free of suffering, but that freedom from suffering pales in comparison to prema bhakti. Now, how is that going to be conveyed and given in a way that it can infiltrate the fixed schools of theistic thought of the day, and specifically in the culture that it was presented? So this is really what is at the heart of the Goswamis codifying Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's contribution to human society. There is another purushartha above artha, dharma, kama, moksha, and that is found through the dispensation. It's fully experienced through the dispensation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, those, of course, in his immediate circle and directly experiencing his presence, well, there was no question. They were converted. They were convinced. They were fully satisfied by Sri Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, and they realized through revelation, through the revelation experience through engagement in Kirtan, what was this message of Prem Bhakti. Now, the Goswamis, they have to locate Lord Chaitanya's theology. They have to locate it on the map, so to speak. Not only that, but they have to plant a flag which flies above all others as to its significance. And this is done primarily through this presentation of Srila Jiva Goswami's. I like to look at it this way. It is not that his presentation was more significant than that of his uncles and the other Goswamis. It's not that it was more significant, but when we look at the sun of the Bhagavat Purana, if we look at that and take that analogy a little step further, sometimes on the sun there are flares. So the Bhagavat Purana is Krishna incarnate. And sometimes there is a sun flare of amazing significance as to the nature of the Supreme Absolute, Sri Krishna. And that flare may come in the form of one of the Goswamis completely detailing the nature of rasa. So we have the Rupa Goswami presenting human society with the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Or we have the presentation of a representation of the the central theme of the Bhagavat Purana by Sanatana Goswami in his Brihat Bhagavatamrita. So they're all shooting out from the sun of the Bhagavat Purana, from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the sun that lights the sky and illuminates the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But as I said, it already had been presented 4,500 years ago. So we can say that really bringing out the significance of the light of that sun was done by the Goswamis. They truly illuminated the illumination that was available through the Bhagavat Purana for all of our benefit. And Jiva Goswami's contribution is he really establishes the theology of Gaudiya Vaishnavism at the level, at the theistic and Siddhantic level of the other great acharyas that came before, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya. He looks at, he has studied all of those, and now having also studied Gaudiya Vaishnavism from the older Goswamis, he's now ready to really establish through the Sandarbhas the overarching significance of the sun of the Bhagavat Purana. And it's extraordinary, as I said, to really comprehend what's going on here from our perspective is a little difficult in the beginning. What I mean by that is here we are 500 years later, and we're coming into Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and well, what's the question? The Bhagavat Purana is the core of theology. Who would question that? Or, we look to the teachings of the Goswamis. We look to the practice of devotional service under the tutelage of disciplic successions coming down from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Goswamis. And we're situated in a spirituality that we're practicing, and we're fully content with that. Theistically, we accept that. But to locate Gaudiya Vaishnavism, this new school of theistic thought of Vedanta in the schools of thought, and establish it significantly so that it stands up with the other schools, this was the undertaking of the Goswamis in general, and it culminates in the presentation of the Sandarbhas by Jiva Goswami. He's coming, he was the youngest. He was like a sponge taking in all this knowledge from the other Goswamis. And here he goes, and he's presenting this for the benefit of all lineages in Kali Yuga, because this is the methodology to be employed in this age of man. This methodology of Harinam Sankirtan. And what is this methodology all about? It's all about giving to those who are the most unfortunate those that have come at the most unfortunate time of mankind, the greatest fortune. Entrance into an understanding of the supreme absolute truth and the cultivation of a relationship which is off the scriptural map, off the map, falls outside of the jurisdiction of what had been accepted before to a large extent. So now we're looking to study we're going and you're looking to study the Sandarbhas of Jiva, to enter into that. And what this study is going to bring to us as students is such a firm grounding in the Bhagavat Purana, understanding what's really the theistic, how we can see the theistic and the theology of the Bhagavat in the Sandarbhas. It cements the ground upon which we stand to take up Gaudiya Vaishnavism. There's no question of the significance of this endeavor in establishing ourselves soundly in spiritual practice. We have to, such knowledge is paramount. Until we ourselves have come to the later stages of sadhana bhakti, ruchi, asakti, until we ourselves are at the experiential plane and entering into bhava, what our practice is based upon is what? We observe those that are actually deeply immersed in the practice themselves, and we hear from them, and that hearing nourishes us, and it nourishes us because of their spiritual standing. Which brings us to where we are here. My time's almost up for this class, but what is the qualification to enter into this study? And does this verse of Jiva's, this sixth Anucheta, close the door on people outside of the practice of Krishna consciousness, outside of the sole aspiration in life of attainment of Lord Krishna? And as I said, it does not. If it did, then Jiva Goswami would not have gone to such pains as to present the theology of Gaudiya Vaishnavism painstakingly, using the theologies and the conclusions that had been accepted by the great theists that came before, the Ramanujas, the Madhvas, the conclusions of Sridhar Swami, who was viewed by many as an Advaitin, as somebody that was putting forth the attainment of Brahman as the supreme goal in spirituality. But it does require the investigator, and I want to read a couple things here. What's at stake here, Jiva's saying, and is that this is not for somebody that's simply interested in armchair philosophy. We have to be able to and willing to enter into it with the entirety of our being. Otherwise, we're not going to really be able to fully appreciate what the Sandarbhas have to offer us. I want to read a sentence from the commentary here. The entire being must be available to the investigation, our entire being. Otherwise, the truth that it intends to disclose will remain hidden, since that truth lies beyond the knowing capacity of the mind alone. And we should note that this warning, this is extended also to those that are oriented towards Lord Krishna, but within their own devotion, they may have some personal ambition outside of full surrender. That doesn't mean that we may not have some conditional interference with our practice. But what it does mean is we need to set aside those things and dive deeply into these Sandarbhas, into our practice of spirituality, with the intent, the overriding intent. That doesn't mean we may not have some other intents in our practices coming, as I said, from conditioning, but the overriding intent and our overriding desire has to be to actually completely and totally fall in love with Krishna, not to go to heaven, not to simply be liberated from material life. This is what's being spoken of here. So even for some people that put themselves forth as being devotees, they also must take care to be willing to set aside any egoic infringements that come along during their practice, during our practice. We need to be able to set those aside. And by doing that sincerely, then we can truly dive into the mysteries of the Sandarbhas, and it's going to be one phenomenal experience in understanding the tradition and aspiring to what Gaudiya Vaishnavism has to offer. And there's so much more to say in that regard, but just we'll close with a little peek. Understand that our practice is based on the Bhagavat Purana, and the Bhagavat Purana shines bright. Why? Because it's based on the personal revelation of the author, Srila Vyasadeva, and the speaker, Srila Sukadeva. They experienced Krishna, and that experience is our aspiration. That is the goal of our spiritual practice. And if we have any other goal than experiencing that heartfelt emotion of deep love for Krishna, then we're going to have trouble entering into the mystery of the Sandarbhas. But we have good association, and we have good examples in our lives and in our line. And we should be successful in this endeavor. With that, I will end. And if anyone has a question, we can take a couple minutes. I don't want to hold you too long. I do want to thank you so much for taking your valuable time to listen to this class. So if anybody wants to unmute themselves, otherwise, I will sincerely thank you for your association. Panchakopatubhischa, Kripasindabevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavijya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.
Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tanapano.
Thank you for your class. Thanks for your class, Daddy.
Bhakti? Bhakti?
Saki or Bhakti?
Bhakti Ras. Can you hear me?
Sri Jiva Goswami.